off the palate. I am your ween. Today, Bridgerton, Season 1, Episode 5, The Duke and I. We pick up right where we left off. And that is, of course, with Daphne having insisted she's going to marry the Duke, announcing it to everybody, and then rushing on home. She sneaks back into the house, changes into her pajamas, gets into bed, just in time for her maid to come wake her up. Her mom, exceedingly hungover, pretending that she just isn't feeling well. Oh, God. More neutral. Okay. Her mom is really hungover from the party the night before, but is pretending that she's not, which is, of course, fine. That's the prerogative of a mother. But Daphne knows she needs to tell her mom that somehow she's engaged to the Duke of Hotness, because her saying we should get married to the Duke of Hotness was enough to make him marry her. I don't know. The point is she and the Duke are getting married, and that's what the episode's about. And I'm fine with that. Whatever. So Daphne comes in, and she's trying very hard to be normal about the wedding. Oh, goodness, that's pink, but we're in it now. Don't worry about what the picture is. Just trust that I have our best interests at heart, okay? Just trust me. We're going to need to do some reforms on this color scheme, however. The Lady Bridgerton is delighted to hear that Daphne is going to marry the Duke, since Lady Bridgerton liked the Duke better, and Daphne is trying pretty hard to convince her mom that they should have the wedding as quickly as possible, because of course she's worried that the other girl who was interested in Prince Nephew, this girl named Cressida, is gonna otherwise reveal that she saw Daphne and the Duke macking on each other in the garden, which would be disastrous for Daphne's reputation and ruin her in some indefinable way that the show can't really explain to us, but that we should all agree, if you're a woman caught engaging in premarital congress with a man, it's over for you. It's Jover. Lady Bridgerton actually takes this news that they have to get married soon because they were getting it on a bit quite well as well, and admits that she had some spicy times with Lord Bridgerton even before they were married, which is not understandably what Daphne wants to hear right now. And I don't blame her for that. I do not blame her for that. Oh, I have not made a good choice about this as a skin color, but here we are, team. We're going to see how it turns out nonetheless. Over at the palace, the queen is crowing over her supposed triumph in getting Prince Nephew engaged to Daphne, who she has this weird fixation on for reasons that are unclear, basically because she's, I don't know, the high school mean girl of the world, which doesn't not make sense as a thing for the Queen of England to be, I guess. I just don't know why we're supposed to think she's like, kind of cool and fun instead of completely, absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But then Lady Whistledown's latest broadsheet reaches the Queen, and as we know, she's very obsessed with Lady Whistledown's broadsheet, and she sees somehow Lady Whistledown already knows about the Duke of Hotness and Daphne getting engaged. Somehow she's got informants everywhere. She's Julie Andrews, whatever. And so the Queen is just utterly disgruntled, as you might expect, and objects seriously to this and decides that she's going to dispatch Prince Nephew to find out what happened. Which is odd because just a couple episodes ago, the Queen was like demanding that Daphne and the Duke get married, but then once she got Prince Nephew onto the scene, she completely changed her mind and it was all about Prince Nephew. But I guess famously the whims of royalty are not always easy to track or predict. Whatever, Queen. She's literally the Queen of Bridgerton anyway. Yeah, I'm trying to draw a hand in this picture. It's gonna be what it is. Back at Bridgerton House, Eloise and Daphne have a fight about getting married. Is it cool or is it lame? And I have to issue a correction because I thought the little girl was the G name Bridgerton, so I named her Gargle last episode, but in fact, she is Hyacinth, and I guess there's a little boy. Somewhere they got a little boy of all things, and he is named Greg. Something awful like that. It's like, okay, Greg. This is a pretty shocking blue color, but we're gonna have to live with it. The Duke of Hotness is late, but does show up to a meeting with Daphne, Lady Bridgerton, and Lady Danbury in the park. And people start asking them about their engagement and stuff, and they don't do a very good job of feigning being in love, and they are quite embarrassing. But Lady Danbury and Lady Bridgerton choose to believe that it's just nerves and that they're going to get over it. And then they will allow their true love to shine through, which is like, we can only hope, team. We can only hope things are going to go that well for them. Anthony tries to go see the opera singer that he's in love with, but the dressmaker lady is there instead, and she's like, your opera singer left town. She doesn't need you. She's over you, which is good for her. Good for her. Anthony, forlorn, but okay, fuck him. Goodbye, Anthony. As they say, bye, bitch. Over at the Featheringtons' house, Lady Featherington is really putting the screws to her husband financially because he ruined their finances with his gambling. And then Colin comes to see Marina. And Penelope tries to intercede. If Marina gets her hooks into Colin, it's over for all Penelope's hopes of being in love with Colin. And so she tells her mom, do you really think Colin's going to propose in time for nobody to know that Marina's pregnant? Maybe you should try to force her to marry that old guy, which I thought was a bit underhanded for Penelope, but still, you know what? Good for her also. It's a show. If you live in a girl boss world, you've got to behave in a girl boss way, I suppose. All the servants at the Bridgerton house are preparing for Daphne's wedding, and it's very busy, and Daphne's maid is particularly very overwhelmed by all the new responsibilities she has. Now she's getting upgraded from being a lady's maid to being like a lady's head of household maid. A serious, like, housekeeper, even, one might say. I see I've accidentally left a lot of holes in the body of this person. I'm gonna fix those, don't worry. She's still also a bit too pink, so that's on the docket, don't worry. That's part of the process. This is a window pane. It looks normal. This is also kind of a wild misrepresentation of the scene because the scene that I'm drawing did not take place in front of a window. However, that's easier to draw as a background than a whole room. And I need some color contrast to really brighten this look. While the servants are preparing for this big wedding, Daphne and her mom are, of course, also preparing. Daphne's mom has taken her to the dressmaker to get her wedding dress done, and then also a set of sexy nightgowns for her wedding night, which is something that I find a little bit creepy. The idea that your mom should get lingerie for you. I know it's normal in some people's families. It's not normal enough for me. It's not normal enough for me. Let Daphne find out about sex before you start getting her lingerie, because as we all know, famously, she doesn't know about sex. She's an adult woman who doesn't know about it. So, yeah, let's not rush the poor girl into this. Let her see the penis before we try to turn her into a Penisaurus Rex, if you will. No, before you ask, I don't know what I mean by that, really. And I will not be taking questions at this time. I don't know if this rendered the person more human looking or just kind of bruised looking, but it's... unfortunately, regrettably, it's where we're at. So, while they're in the dress store, Cressida, the girl who wanted to get with the prince before Daphne ruined everything for her and then basically called her a bitch for it, comes in, and she and Daphne talk about how she saw the Duke of Hotness outraging Daphne's person in the garden. And basically, Daphne just straight up threatens her life and is like, look, you don't want to make an enemy of me, because I'm going to be the next Duchess of Hotness. So either we can be friends or I can destroy you. And Cressida is like, okay, sure, whatever you say, Daphne. And leaves it sort of unresolved. So I guess we'll be following up on that shortly, presumably. But also, if Daphne and the Duke successfully get married, literally what can Cressida do? Also, like, what happens if you're a lady who gets married and everybody agrees it was a little rushed, but oh well, like, Are you in that much trouble? Is it that big of a deal? Because you did get married. You did manage it. Back at the palace, Prince Nephew is like, I think I should leave town as I can't marry Daphne. You know, I talked to her, and he did talk to her, and he actually very sweetly was just like a nice guy about it. He was like, oh, it's a shame, I really liked you, but if you're happier with the Duke of Hotness, then I support you and your marriage. As long as you are happy and the Duke is happy and nobody's being forced to be married or is miserable. And I thought that was a really nice change from the normal love triangle shtick. He was just a nice guy about it. He didn't win, and that was okay. He's literally a prince. He's going back to Prussia. What does he have to be mad about? And so I was happy, and I'm still fond of Prince Nephew. But the queen is mad at Prince Nephew. She's like, why aren't you trying harder to cause drama? My only interest in life as the Queen of England is in drama. And you're not making enough of it, Prince Nephew. And he says that he would still kind of prefer not to. So the queen decides to take things here meaning drama, into her own hands. And so when the Duke of Hotness and Anthony are meeting at the church to see the Archbishop, which we have now confirmation that the characters of Bridgerton are members of the Church of England, and they get married in a church. Do they have beliefs about God that guide them to their behaviors? Perhaps, for example, their beliefs about marital chastity and things? Well, that's harder to quantify. That's much harder to quantify, but I'm going to choose to believe yes. Duke of Hotness, in a surprising W, refuses Anthony's offer of Daphne's dowry and says, put it in a trust for her to use if she wants. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to take care of her, and I think dowries are kind of creepy. Paying for women is a bit sketch. And I thought that was really cool of him, and I'm giving him the props he deserves in that regard. Anthony also apologizes for shooting a gun at Duke Hot, which I thought was nice of him. The Duke of Hotness saying, you know, if you hadn't tried to shoot me in our duel, I would have been a little disappointed. So that's good. The girls, and by the girls, of course, I mean the guys, are no longer fighting. But then the Archbishop comes out and he says he can't grant a marriage license for the wedding to happen this week. And everybody's like, why? What's happening? But we all know it's the queen. It's the queen being like, you can't get married because I am like a weird petulant tyrant. That's what royalty are for, especially in a story. So Daphne and Anthony and the Duke of Hotness are having a meeting about it, and they're all a bit frustrated. But then Lady Bridgerton, Lady Danbury arrive. They explain the situation. Lady Danbury says, yeah, this is obviously the interventions of the queen. So let me tell you, the only thing you can really do with the queen is appease her because she's our hereditary monarch. So what you guys should do is you should do a personal appeal to her, tell her how much in love you are because she's a sucker for romance stories, and be sincere and be romantic about it. It'll work out for you. You just have to be legit. And Daphne's like, be sincere and romantic. But of course, what no one else knows is that we're not really in love. Even though I'm in love with the Duke, he doesn't love me back. Don't worry. These questions will get resolved pretty soon in terms of the Duke and does he love me back, but we're not there yet. Bridgerton goes to his artist friend's salon again, but it's not just a drawing session, it's a big party, and like a sexy party, a sexual party. And so for now we learn Bridgerton is not the gay brother. I don't like that. I want something else for that. He's just a guy. He does flirt with the dressmaker and makes out with her, and then he starts making out with another lady who's hot, and while they're looking for somewhere to make out, he comes across his artist friend, and his artist friend is very much macking on a dude. So we can say, okay, Bridgerton, he may not be the gay brother as far as we know yet, but certainly he is the ally brother, the #ally brother. This is an incredibly sick brush. And I know that they don't do a lot of like cyber future Technicolor edging in Bridgerton, but they do now. They do now that I'm in charge. The Duke of Hotness's boxer friend, who I must also make another apology and retraction. In my last drawing, I depicted him with hair, but he is in fact bald. That was not meant as an attack on the persons of bald people. It was simply an attack on the fact that I can't really remember much about the characters of Bridgerton once like 10 minutes have passed, so I apologize. If he appears in the future, he shall be as bald as God intended. Anyway, the Duke of Hotness's boxer friend finds him drunken, lying about, behaving in a carousing manner, and also lamenting the agonies of being married and how Daphne doesn't love him. She's just been forced to marry him because he outraged her in the garden. And I mean, that's pretty fair. And his friend is like, all right, stop with the pity party, Duke of Hotness, which is good. We always need someone to be like, stop the pity party, Duke of Hotness. Let's go get you sobered up. And so his buddy takes him home to give him a little slap. Give him a little slap to get his brain going again. And also probably a pot to barf in. Lady Featherington is trying to force Marina to get married again, but she doesn't want to because she doesn't want to marry the nasty old guy. So she decides to make a deal with Lady Featherington. She says, okay, Lady Featherington, look, give me a chance to seduce Colin Bridgerton. I'll seduce him sexually, then I can pass this kid that I'm already pregnant with off as his kid. He's a good guy, so he'll do the honorable thing and get married to me, and then all our problems will be solved. You'll be more directly connected with the Bridgertons, who are very influential for some reason, and I'll be with a guy who I actually like. And Penelope overhears all of this, much to her dismay, since, of course, as we know, she's in love with Colin, and so she doesn't want him to get married to anyone who isn't her, especially not someone who is, misleading him. Like, that's a fair cop on Penelope's part. So now she's got to figure out how is she going to stop Marina from marrying Colin. And it's a good question. It's a good question, honestly. I promise these aren't pit stains. These are shadows. I know they resemble pit stains significantly, but that's because nobody's nerfect. Queen, in a little break to have some pathos for the queen, she hears that the king is remarkably sane today. So she goes to talk to him, and he is able to recognize her. And if you are not aware, but I'm sure you are because Hamilton was a thing. King George, famously a nut. I think this is the same King George. Also, I don't care if it isn't. Maybe it's the King George after him. King George, famously a nut. And so he had to have a regent. It's the regency. He's still insane in the Bridgerton universe. She tries to talk to him, but all he really wants is to talk to their daughter, who we learn she died. And so he has a bit of a meltdown about it, understandably. The queen is chased away by her husband as he's out of his right mind, and that's a shame. We feel sorry for her. Basically, we learn, okay, the queen also has a sad backstory. We should feel sorry for her, which is like, maybe. I'll consider it. Daphne can't sleep because she's worried about her wedding, understandably, and so she goes out to the garden to think about things, and her maid finds her there and reassures her that she's got everything planned for the wedding and it's going to be fine. And Daphne admits some of her anxieties to the maid, but the maid doesn't quite grasp the subtlety and import of what she's saying and tries to reassure her in a couple ways. But Daphne's not quite convinced and lets slip that the Duke isn't able to have children. Although, again, what Daphne doesn't understand is that, as we know, or at least suspect at this point, it's not that he's impotent, it's just that he doesn't want to have them, which is also fine. In my opinion, it would be ideal if we could just be down with the Duke not wanting to have children, but I know that we can't, and that at some point he's going to learn his lesson about how children are going to complete his life, despite the fact that he doesn't want to be a father and he hated his evil dad. But c'est la vie. C'est la vie. Okay, not Brown though. Over at the boxer friend's house, it's morning time now. The Duke of Hotness is waking up, and his friends are making fun of him for being such a drunkard and a doofus. And so he invites them to the wedding because they are kind of his only friends. And they happily accept. And that's good. I'm glad that the Duke has some positive influences in his life besides Anthony, such as his kindly boxer friend and his kindly boxer friend's kindly wife. The Duke of Hotness, Daphne, Lady Danbury, Lady Bridgerton go before the Queen. Daphne starts trying to give the Queen a pitch, but she's not doing a great job. The Duke of Hotness decides it's time for him to intervene, and he really hams it up, telling a powerful romantic tale about how he and Daphne, they took it upon themselves to have a complex ruse whereby they influenced all the people to believe that they were in love instead of really being in love. But it was by that faking that they were in love that the Duke of Hotness came to find that Daphne was, after all, his dearest friend in life, and he realized he did need to marry her. And it was only when she started to hang out with the prince that he discovered, I do need Daphne in my life forever. The Queen is convinced by that. She's moved by it, but she gives Daphne the chance to say no if she doesn't want to marry the Duke of Hotness. But after such a romantic and handsome speech, Daphne feels like, she does want to marry him after all. So we cut straight to the wedding. It's a pretty nice, low-key wedding. I don't have anything against it. It's just friends and family, but they are dressed up nice, and, it goes off smoothly. No problems, in my opinion. I'm there to support, in this rare case. But then they have a giant wedding reception after the low-key private wedding, which I guess they kind of have to. People of their station being what they are. But it's not what I would have been looking forward to were I them. But that's one of many reasons I'm not them. At the wedding reception, Penelope is trying to convince Marina to give up Colin because she doesn't want him to have his whole life kind of derailed into a sham marriage. But Marina rightly says, well, why do you really want me to have to entrap a guy who isn't really a nice guy into a relationship then? Because I don't want to have a bad husband. Colin's a nice guy, and if I have to seduce him to marry him, I pretty much will. And so it's not really, they don't really manage to reach a détente. Then Lady Featherington arrives to announce that the old guy who she was trying to set Marina up is now off the table, and so Marina's delighted to hear this, which means she has pretty much a free shot at Colin, although she's not really thinking about how it makes the stakes of this Colin thing much higher, but oh well. And then she goes to look for Colin while driving Penelope off. Penelope is feeling quite down, and when she runs into Eloise, they're still too embarrassed about their fight to talk to each other, and so that's a shame as well, because now Penelope doesn't really have any kind of ally to talk about her troubles with either. Marina manages to take Colin off to a room alone where she puts the moves on him, but unfortunately he's too much of a gentleman to get into it with her. He's so gentlemanly that the feeling of lustiness is enough to inspire him to propose marriage. And so he and Marina are engaged, although for now it is a secret. And Marina is a bit worried that it's not going to happen in time. This is proving challenging, but I am up to the challenge. Maybe I'm not. She looks like a Roblox character. Maybe it will help if I give her a nose. So Marina's problems are not solved, but they're not, her goals are moving forward just slowly. The Queen is also at this reception, and she talks to Daphne, but mostly just to make kind of what I would feel sexually inappropriate references for poor Daphne about, at least she's going to have a good time on her wedding night because of the rakish nature of the Duke, which the Queen is allowed to say whatever she wants. And then as she walks away from Daphne, she overhears Eloise accusing Lady Danbury of being Lady Whistledown. Lady Danbury is like, no, I'm not. And so the Queen becomes very interested in this investigation, and she insists Eloise communicate to her any advances in the search for Lady Whistledown. So that's good. Now that Eloise has got the backing of the state on her hunt for Lady Whistledown, surely it won't be long now. Yes, I'm just coloring in her mouth black. I'm not... You know, I have my limitations. I have my limitations, as we're about to see, by the fact that I've done a truly horrible picture of a perfectly lovely actress. While at the party, Binkerton runs into his artist buddy. And when his artist buddy is like, "Oh, say, Binkerton, what you saw at the party," Binkerton is like, "Oh, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything at all." And then his artist friend comes to introduce his beautiful wife to Binkerton. And Binkerton discovers, oh my god, the beautiful wife is one of the ladies he was macking on at the party. Gasp. Clearly, they have a bit of a free love relationship going on. Then Daphne and Anthony are hanging out, and he starts blatting about how many children she and the Duke are going to have, and she becomes overwhelmed because of her sadness about how the Duke is, in her mind, impotent, but in our minds, of course, we know, sworn to a solemn vow not to ever have children just to get one over on his evil father. Which is a valid reason not to have children, as all reasons not to have children are. So she goes, a bit distressed, she goes to sit in her room and really think about what's going on, what's to become of her. And it's there that her mother finds her, and she tries to give Daphne a talk about human sexuality. And she does a frankly god-awful job of it. Does not provide any useful or direct information to Daphne. And that's what this drawing is depicting. The moment that Lady Bridgerton says, "Now, Daphne, do you remember at the country house we had a pair of dogs? And, you know, no one told them about the act, and yet they managed to have puppies anyway," which is not useful preparation for your daughter who, let's remind ourselves, doesn't know what sex is, had to have masturbation explained to her by a guy. Recently she had to have masturbation explained to her by a guy. She literally doesn't even know that there is a sex act. She's dumb. Your Honor, she's dumb. But having recovered with the assistance of her mother, giving her helpful explanation that dogs don't have language and yet they figure out how to do it, which is awesome, Mom. Thanks. Daphne prepares to set out. She says goodbye to all her siblings, and she gives Eloise her grown-up bedroom, her own bedroom, thus signaling that the two of them have, buried the hatchet. And she says goodbye to all her siblings, and she gets in the carriage with the Duke of Hotness, at which point the Duke of Hotness reveals that they are not going to make it all the way to his estate because it's pretty far away, so they just spend the night in an inn. And Daphne's a bit sad about that they're going to spend their wedding night at an inn. It's not very romantic. And the Duke of Hotness is contrite, and he apologizes for not letting her know. So they go to the inn, and the Duke of Hotness reveals that they are going to sleep in separate rooms, which is also not very sexy or romantic. And so Daphne is like, "You really must hate me, I guess this is just what our married life is going to be like. Miserable and unsatisfying." And she's pacing around, despairing. And the Duke of Hotness is pacing around his room, also despairing. And then they both resolve to talk to each other at, exactly the same time. So when Daphne opens her door to go get him, he's right there. I don't know where my brush is. Help. Girl, help. And then it turns out the Duke of Hotness was just asking her if she wanted to go to dinner, and she's like, "No, I don't want to go to dinner. I want to resolve whether you hate me or not, and whether our marriage is going to be miserable, etc., etc." And the Duke of Hotness reveals, apropos of nothing, that he's been truly in love with Daphne this whole time, which is like, that would be great if we had seen any evidence of that. That would be awesome if I were convinced by that and I thought it were believable, because he had ever evinced a sense of being interested in Daphne in any way. And he says that what he told the queen is true, and he became best friends with her, and then he fell in love with her. And she says she feels the same way and is in love with him. So they start making out, and the Duke asks her if it's okay to have sex. He's very polite in terms of his consent check-ins. and they get nude, and he asks her about whether she really masturbated like they talked about, and if it was a good time and what she thinks about. And she's like, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about you. And he's like, nice. And then they do it, and you see the Duke's butt a lot. And then he pulls out right before he busts. But she doesn't notice, and she's like, okay, I had a good time. And you know what? Good for her. Happy for you, Daphne. And that's where the episode ends, with nutting, which is a fine place for an episode to end. I didn't really mind this episode. This was one of the better episodes for me because things actually happened. We advanced the Marina plot. We advanced Daphne and the Duke of Hotness getting married plot. We advanced Binkerton's plot. That's all I want from a show. I want to watch a show and have things happen. I just want to see actual things happen in the story of the show, or at least for the characters to have experiences that make them more interesting. I just want things to happen in the show. I want to apologize directly to the actress that plays Lady Bridgerton. She is a lovely looking middle-aged lady. She does not look like a big boobs Roblox MILF, as some people have depicted her. Most notably, yours truly. Oh, God. Yet I can't repent, because I really think the curtains turned out nice. And her hand is almost recognizable as a hand. So I'm going to call this one a draw. And also, I want you to think about what your mom would look like at the moment she was explaining sex to you. A person who had somehow reached the age of adulthood without finding out even a tiny bit of what sex might be. She wouldn't look her best either. So with all that in store, we're over the halfway point now, because this was episode 5 and there's 8 episodes. We have to prepare ourselves emotionally for what I'm sure will be a non-stop thrill ride right to the climax, just as Daphne's first sexual experience was. But honestly, I'm a little excited, if only because I have a very special episode planned for the post-finale season wrap-up. And so I hope you will stick with me here as we continue this relentless and painful march toward the end of Bridgerton and the exciting conclusion which I have in store. This has been your Ween. Godspeed.